It's like Tetris. Cut. But it's at like a grand life scale. Chop, snip, snip. Aye. Hello. Cut. Welcome to, today we're going to talk about something I wrote called Pure Nonsense. Cut, cut, cut. I don't have a clapperboard. Chop, chop. That's fine. Fleas of the mind making you itchy. You can't really get a collar for that. You take this and you take that, and then you put these two things together that don't seem to go together.
One of these kids is
And you get something new.
doing his own thing.
That's all it is. The piece I wrote, start to finish, pure nonsense.
Oh, that bag ain't lying.
I think we can all agree on that. I'm not offended. Quite tickled by it, actually. Yeah, I did that. Start to finish. Because if I am going to do nonsense, you bet your ass I'm going to make it pure.
Absolutely pure.
Backstory. All stories start somewhere. At the start, usually. Somewhere. With something. But the hardest part is finding the start. Or starting. Or having the somewhere. Or the thing that starts it. You just need the start. A little jump off point. Into the pool. What's the first line? Something you can walk up to the edge to and say, there's the start. Then you put your feet on it and away you go. It can be really hard to find the start.
I can start again today.
Because you don't know what you're starting. Unless you do know what you're starting, in which case, hats off to you. Congratulations. You must be really organised, because a lot of us, we have no idea what we're doing. We don't know where to start. We don't know how to start. We don't know what we're starting. But sometimes, by starting, you can start something, and that's all you need. Just the start, the blocks, the first line. The first line.
What's my first line?
What if all you have is one line? You don't know what to do with that line, and so you put it away. You store it in the cupboard. Old Mother Hubbard. Stick it in the back behind the rice. Batter. Yeast. Popping corn. These are just words. Weird herbs. Or herbs, as Americans say. Pretty soon, if you're lucky, you get all these, single lines that don't really know each other, and they hang out in the cupboard together, like all that random pantry stuff. Soy. Always that little tin of corn kernels. What you got that for? Tomato paste. Brown rice, Calrose. These are just words.
I was afraid of worms, Roxanne, worms!
They don't know each other. They don't talk to each other. They're completely unrelated lines. What can you do with those lines? Well, you could do what I did this week, which was to take a bunch of those lines and then write these other lines that joined them all up to create pure nonsense. These are just words. Cut up technique. These things are connected. Let's connect them. Cut, cut, cut. So in my Mother Hubbard desperation, I went into that cupboard and I pulled out
And pull out a plum.
a line that I had. Cut, 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 which is the first line of the thing I wrote. Cut up technique, which was two strong wills dueling in the alley, the smell of wet brick. If you've ever smelt wet brick, it's got a very earthy, distinct smell. I don't know about the two strong wills dueling in the alley. Who knows? Chop. Let's take that line and write something. Like I said, snip, snip, chop, chop. Here's the thing. I was saving that line. For what? Who knows? You get to a certain point when all you've got is notebooks full of these single lines that never go anywhere and never the start of anything because you never go back to them.
What's the first line?
They just sit in that book.
Wherever you go.
Waiting. For what? Who knows? Waiting for their time to shine. Waiting for you to open the doors and look at them and say, I know what you're going to be. You're going to be a short story. You're going to be the start of a novel or whatever. Who knows? In this case, two strong wills dueling in the alley, the smell of wet brick, never going to be anything, trust me. But I thought, you're in the cupboard. That's an ingredient. I don't know what the recipe is. What you should get is other lines, and then you can make some sort of, blancmange. Remix. So I dug some more. I found these other unconnected lines that really didn't mean anything, that had just been hanging out in notebooks. These are just words.
Tell her you were afraid of words.
And I thought a smart person, someone with, I won't call it skill, but someone with, motivation, could probably stitch those lines together. Take some disparate lines that have no relation, that really probably don't even like each other. Nor should they be anywhere near each other. But maybe what you could do is stack them in some way, cut up or put them in a bag and shake them up, and then see how they come out of the bag and whether that makes something.
What's my first line?
So I had my wet brick line, and then I had three other lines. Let me read them to you. Ragged person on the moors, rubbing at the nape. I don't know. A rodent underfoot, seeking energy. I don't know. Why don't bother writing that one down? The paper cuts are infected. It's a statement of fact. Also something you don't really want to happen. I think they're very easy to get infected. affected. It's a statement of fact. Anyway, 4 lines. Read them out one by one. There's nothing. What if, thought I, what if I go ahead and just, in 5 minutes, write a bunch of just lines without thinking of those being linked at all either. Just like generate lines, just line after line. And then, dear listener, watcher, reader, did you go read it? You should go read it. Then I could work out some sort of structure that would bring them all together and write something that, even though it was made up of these disparate things that didn't go together, suddenly felt like it did. It would be sort of like William Burroughs' cut-up technique. Jump cut.
A cut-up.
Lands gracefully like a cat in a field. Toast landing, butter side up. On the kitchen floor. Sidebar, you may approach the bench. Let's talk about the cut-up technique, shall we? I mentioned William Burroughs because he's probably the most well-known, let's call him an aficionado of the technique, but I would just say he more brought it to the forefront of people's knowledge. It was around before him. I'm just going to mention the highlights.
Just the facts, ma'am.
I'm just going to read something to you now, and it's to do with the Dadaists. Dadaists. Quote, in late 1920, the Dadaist writer Tristan Tzara, T-Z-A-R-A, wouldn't be an episode if I didn't mispronounce someone's name. Tristan Tzara wrote Dada Manifesto on Feeble Love and Bitter Love, which included a section called To Make a Dadaist Poem, and it gave these instructions, which I am about to read to you right now. Cut! Take a newspaper, take some scissors. Choose from this paper an article of the length you want to make your poem. Cut out the article. Next, carefully cut out each of the words that makes up this article and put them all in a bag. Shake gently. Next, take out each cutting one after the other. Copy conscientiously in the order in which they left the bag. The poem will resemble you, and there you are, an infinitely original author of charming sensibility, even though unappreciated by the vulgar herd. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I think you would all agree, that is an early description of the cut-up technique and how to achieve the desired output. Now, Burroughs. You know what I've just realised? I've still never finished Naked Lunch. That book is a chore. Should you waste time reading books you're really not getting? Woof. Okay, so Burroughs said he got the idea, or was inspired by, painter, writist, experimental artist type called Brian... Here comes the butcher. Brian Gysin. And he was a pioneer of the cut-up technique. Here's a quote. Gysin is speaking. I had a number of sheets of newspaper and I took a Stanley blade and cut through them, and little bits and pieces looked so amusing to me that I started jiggling them around as one would a collage. Gysin had accidentally rediscovered the cut-up method, a technique that can be traced back to at least the Dadaists I just mentioned. I'm on the right path. So glad when all these things come together, these disparate things that I'm joining together in this little cut-up of whatever the fuck this is. So Brian did his first cut-ups with the old newspapers, and I think he also did some multimedia stuff with tape, sound, audio, that kind of stuff. It's like a montage-y kind of, I guess it is sort of like... Doesn't matter. Billy got inspired by this, and he started doing his own version of the cut-up. It appealed to him. It tripped his little trigger. Between 1961 and 1964, he produced 3 novels, part of a trilogy called the Nova Trilogy. And the first book in that series was called The Soft Machine. Isn't that the name of a band? Yes, named after the book by William Burroughs. That book, it's stitched together using chapters and pages from previous manuscripts that Mr. Burroughs had worked on in the 50s.
I may make a cut-up out of 10 pages, use a sentence.
So you simply wait until coincidence gives you something artistically good in your terms.
I won't say it's unreadable, but I will say I will not be reading anymore. Did I mention I haven't finished Naked Lunch yet? Now, another great believer in the cut-up technique,
I know, let's see what happens,
was none other than Mr. Davy Jones. No, not that one.
I'm an alligator.
The Thin White Duke. David Bowie. David Bowie. Bowie. I say Bowie because that's just how I grew up saying it. Now, he would use it as a technique to actually take things in different directions. And this was just a way to like get that old brain firing.
There might be something within a sentence which triggers off an idea.
Don't just take my word for it. Take it away, David.
This is the way I do it. I've used this method only on a couple of actual songs. What I've used it for more than anything else is igniting anything that might be in my imagination.
I gotta say, those scissors, they look like your mum's good sewing scissors. I don't know whether he's allowed to be using those. I recognise the sound that good scissors make when it cuts paper because I would get in trouble every time I would use those.
If you put 3 or 4 disassociated ideas together and created awkward relationships with them, the unconscious intelligence that comes from those pairings is really quite startling sometimes.
You know the phrase I like in there? Unconscious intelligence. I mean, not unconscious as in you're out cold. It's just like an intelligence that happens unconsciously.
Explain.
Why am I over-explaining everything? Quite the explorer, the old brain space. I love it. What are we saying?
I'll take articles out of newspapers, poems that I've written, pieces of other people's books, and put them all into this little warehouse of this container of information, and then hit the random button, and it'll randomize everything, and I'll get reams of papers back out of it with interesting ideas.
Reams of paper with interesting ideas. Chop chop! Fun fact, Tom York is rumoured to have used the cut-up technique during Kid A. I don't know where I read that. I'm not going to bother to verify it. Fight me in the comments. I mean, when you think about it, is the cut-up technique any different than how your brain works, except you're basically doing it in front of you. You're taking your brain out of your head and you're putting it in front of you and you're cutting it up and you're assembling it so that you can visually see it as it's happening rather than trying to just like let it all happen in here and work it out and come out through your fingers as you're typing.
What's up with your brain today?
I mean, it's a scramble in there for sure, but then there's the physicality of it, of just bringing it out. I like that idea. That's why my desk is always so messy, by the way. I like to have my brain laid out in front of me so that I can pick and choose. Sometimes, not all the time. It's the inside brain living outside of the brain, laid out in front of you so that you can shuffle it around on the table and make connections that maybe occur more organically. Or they're more instinctual because you can see them. It's very visual. Burroughs said,
Life is a cut-up.
brilliant! I'm a cut-up. Dumb. We are all of us sentences on bits of paper being cut up and joined together on timelines to create the story of humanity. Brilliant! And a lot of the time that doesn't make any sense because these sentences should not go together. Weird, eh? Dumb. It's like a mind map in a way. You know, these disconnected thoughts laid out, trying to create these little synaptic connections to each other to make sense of something that maybe doesn't make sense. Like the thing I wrote. Magnetic fridge poetry. It's all we are. It's a recipe. Ingredients. Making a cake, which I tried to make sense. And I think by its nonsensicality, peepholes and carpet snakes, there's a kind of sense to it, she said, looking hopefully at you, who read it, no doubt, because you clicked the link and went and had a read. Well, maybe you let me read it to you. I don't know. You do you. I mean, there is randomness at the start.
Shit's random.
But as you organise the randomness, it becomes more methodical. It's organised randomness. I had my lines. Who is your master now? I joined my lines. And is he in the Senate? I started. I finished. There it is. The drapes rage at the crack of the sill. That's cut-up. It's sort of like a hybrid cut-up technique. Some lines I just wrote as glue to join things together. And that's part of the technique too. There's a kind of freedom to generating things that don't have to connect to start off with, and you just find out what they are as they go. Look at this line. Tattooed in the parlour with ink squeezed from catalogues, the colours bleeding into the pores of perception and testing positive for faith. I brought in these other lines, and you know, maybe they didn't plug in exactly, but I gave it a red hot go.
Thumbs up.
The greater point is, all you need is a start. It doesn't really matter where you go from there, as long as you go somewhere. Just get going. Write the first line. Everything that comes after that, whether it's usable or not, that's not really the point. Just start writing. It's an exercise in freedom of letting your mind go, letting it wander, seeing where it takes you. It's cut up in action. Whether you actually physically cut up sentences or not everything you make has to make sense.
It makes no sense!
I'm not submitting this to some grading committee who will give me some sort of letter that says whether it's worthwhile reading or not. I'm doing it for me. This is just practice. Because practice makes practice. Start somewhere. Cut out your sentences. Put them in a bag and go. Sidebar, you may approach the bench. I have an Austin Kleon blackout poem right there where he would take a page from a newspaper and black out things and leave some words exposed, and those words form a poem. Shall I get it off the wall? Woo, she got some dust on her. So this is the Austin Kleon blackout poem, and it reads thusly. I mean, yes, we're sinking, but the music is exceptional. That's a variation of a cut-up, except it's, instead of adding things together, it's removing things. Okay, I'm done. We're going to end it here. Is this the last sentence? Did I just make this sentence up? You should subscribe. If I said hit the bell for notifications, would you think that was a random sentence? Tangent here, but I just want to remind you that William Burroughs did not write anything until he was 35. It's a late start. It's time for you. Don't worry. It's always time. Well, there's not always time, but you can start at any point.